Hey ladies, so today I want to talk about why you have run labs. You've run labs for your hormones, you've run labs for pretty much probably anything, and you feel like it doesn't match your symptoms. You still have all these symptoms, but you're being told left and right, your labs are normal, sorry, there's nothing we can do for you, which is obviously extremely frustrating. And actually a lot more common than you would think, okay? Because maybe you're feeling bloated, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling exhausted, your periods are awful, and you're really not imagining it. You just haven't run the right labs, okay? And this is even, I've had a client, for example, who came from a family of doctors, and she had had all the labs run, right? Because she had the resources to be able to just run all these labs, and everything was coming back normal. And she was postpartum, about 6 months postpartum, had no energy, couldn't lose any weight. And she said, I just don't feel like the mom I want to be. I don't have energy to like play with my kid. I come home from work, I'm exhausted, but everything was quote unquote normal. And this is where running the right labs can really give you an edge, right? And first of all, I want to kind of talk about what functional labs are. And I feel like they kind of live on a world of their own right now. And everyone goes, oh, you just need functional testing. But what is functional testing? And did you know that blood work can be functional testing? It can. You just have to be looking at the right ranges. And then I also feel like functional testing can go into the realm of much deeper testing, not just your basic lipid panel or stool test or anything like that. Okay. So let's just start with basic blood panel. For example, if you were going to ask your doctor to have a thyroid panel done, they're going to be running TSH, and that's it. And that makes me laugh because TSH isn't even produced by your thyroid. So obviously not a thyroid panel, right? And when your doctor is looking at these ranges, there's a very wide range of what they call normal. Over here, you have people that are really sick, and over here, you have people that are really healthy, right? And you're probably smack dab in the middle. Your labs aren't bad enough to be told that you're really sick and obviously need to have medication, and you're not really healthy where you're asymptomatic, right? And so you're told you're normal. Okay. Now that's not useful for us because you still have symptoms, but you have to also think about it from the doctor's perspective because you're not sick enough to be given medication. He's not trained in nutrition. He's not trained in lifestyle, which is what would move those markers over to the really healthy. So obviously he's like, you're normal. You're not sick. You're not dying, right? You're good. So what we look at for functional ranges or functionality, hair shutting over here, is much tighter ranges, right? We're looking for the range that is asymptomatic, right? You don't have any symptoms, right? And that means that those markers are much tighter, okay? And that's where, yes, you can actually run blood work that can be looked at through a functional lens. And you can run a full thyroid panel, which if you're ever just wondering, what is a full thyroid panel? I personally like to see TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and both antibodies, but also like a lipid panel, a metabolic panel, fasting insulin, A1C, all of those things can be looked at through a functional lens and actually give you a lot of insight into your detox capability and liver load and all of that. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to run all of these special labs to run hormone labs, to look at functional ranges and to get answers. Let's just call hormone labs. Hormone labs are basically going to give you the correct insight on what you need. And I will tell you that a lab that I often have my clients run is basic blood panel because I love to see what fasting insulin looks like. I love to see what fasting glucose looks like. I love to see what your A1C is and gives us a starting range of where we can dig deeper. We love to see how our kidneys and our liver could maybe use some more work, okay? But I hope that explains the difference between functional and conventional like ranges. And then the other big difference when you're looking at, I have hormone issues, where can I go from here? What other things you can do to help you uncover what's going on with your hormones outside of a basic blood panel goes into the labs that I think people really would call more functional labs because you typically don't get these at your conventional doctor. And I think that's where they really got that name. And some of these are really, taking on a world of their own and like really having their moment, which is cool. One, which is foundational for all my clients, is a hair tissue mineral analysis. Okay. And let me talk about why it's foundational. Minerals are the spark plugs to your body. So this is going to help you understand adrenal health, blood sugar, thyroid at more of that cellular level. So let's talk about this. So let's say your thyroid lab is completely optimal. TSH is between 0.5 and 2. All your markers look really great. Your antibodies are normal, or below what people would say normal. They're negative. You don't have them. You don't have any type of an autoimmune issue going on. But your temps are really low. Let's say like when you're doing your basal body temps are consistently below like 97.5. You feel like you have cold hands and feet. You feel like you're dealing with hair loss. And then we look at minerals and we look at your hair tissue mineral analysis, and we see that the minerals that are very specific to thyroid health, like potassium, and calcium, are not where they should be. So the cool thing about potassium is it actually sensitizes the cell to your thyroid hormone. So even though at a glandular level, thyroid is doing just fine, if we don't have enough potassium, then unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of issues of hypothyroidism, even though it's not at a glandular level. It starts at the cellular level. And something else to kind of consider here is that potassium is your stress mineral. So the more stressed you are, the more depleted you are in potassium. The more depleted you are in potassium, the more stressed you are. And then on top of that, potassium is one of the cofactors for magnesium, right? What is one of the minerals we also need for thyroid health? Magnesium. So not only are we being depleted in potassium, we don't have enough potassium, so we're not sensitizing ourselves to our thyroid hormone, but then we aren't able to utilize magnesium correctly, and you just have a world of hurt, which is why stress actually plays such a big role in thyroid issues. And I know we talk about managing stress all the time, but I hope that that's a very real life example for you in terms of how it impacts your actual labs. Now, does that mean that we should go out and take potassium supplementation? No, I don't actually think you should. Unless you've tested, please don't do that. That's not intelligent. You can always look at it through food, which is really quite useful. But that's a very real life example of why hair tissue mineral analysis is one of my foundational labs with all of my clients. And then on top of that, you have to look through it through the lens of somebody focused on hormones. Okay. So I know people that run hair tissue mineral analysis that are dentists, but they're not going to be looking at it through the lens of what's going on with your hormones. They're going to be looking at it through the lens of how can we optimize these minerals for your teeth, your dental health, right? I'm looking at it through the lens of how I can optimize your hormones. So I gave you an example of the thyroid. Another example is going to be copper. So copper plays a really big role with estrogen. So think about copper making estrogen stronger. It's not increasing the amount of estrogen, it's making it stronger. So if you have a cup of water and you put food flavoring in it that's clear, think about that as estrogen. And let's say I put a colored food flavoring in, that would be adding copper to the estrogen. Now it's just like in your face, right? That's how copper and estrogen interact. And copper is something that we look at on a hair tissue mineral analysis because you do need copper. Copper actually plays a really big role in fertility. It plays a big role in implantation. It plays a really big role in the optimization of iron in your body. It also plays a really big role in your gut health and digestion. But too much copper, not good, right? And now this is where we come to play with our adrenals, because our adrenals need the minerals they need to function and produce what's called ceruloplasmin, which is how we transport copper through our body. And if we aren't producing enough ceruloplasmin, if our adrenals don't have the minerals that they need to function, and then we are starting to get overloaded with this copper, your body is really smart. It's very smart. And it is going to start storing that copper in soft tissue, like the liver, for example, because we can't just have all this toxic copper circulating around, right? Our body's function is always to support us and keep us alive, right? And then what happens is maybe you're like, I have hormonal issues. I need to start supporting my liver. And you start supporting your liver and your liver goes, great, let's start moving this copper. But we didn't start at the foundation. And now you're mobilizing all this copper and you start having more issues. Maybe you have more acne. Maybe you're starting to have a lot of mental health issues. Maybe you're starting to have a lot of anxiety. Maybe your periods are getting worse. Maybe you're having heavier periods, more period cramps. That's copper. So this is why hair tissue mineral analysis for me is the foundational lab. Yes, I love a lot of other labs and I use a lot of other labs when it comes to hormones, but I always start with hair tissue mineral analysis. And the reason why is because minerals are the spark plugs to every function in your body. So if you are having hormonal issues, I can promise you if I look at your Dutch test, it's going to look screwy. it's going to look screwy, right? But then we have to go upstream and go, okay, where can we support all of these functions before they even make it to hormones? And that's minerals. That's why I start with hair tissue mineral analysis. It is so important. And you can get hair tissue mineral analysis through our membership. So if you go to leahbrueggemann.com and you go to services, you can, in our membership, you're allowed to get these labs that you want and have us analyze them for you. This is also one of the labs that's included in our hormone reset program, which is our 6-month program where we're literally going to walk you through the complete transformation of resetting your hormones. So if you're already like, okay, I need all of those things, book your call. Literally, just go to bit.ly/HRP free call. You literally can go and hop on a call and talk to one of my past clients and get her perspective, share your story, see if the hormone reset's a good fit. Be confident stepping into this journey that we are the right people to partner with. Okay, another test that I think is something that would go into my hormone lab category would be a Dutch test. So the reason why I like this one over just blood, I do like using blood. I think it's a great way to get a quick snapshot, but I really do like the Dutch test as well because it identifies not just hormone levels, but their pathways. So how you detox estrogen, how much cortisol you're making, how much DHEA, how much testosterone. And I think that's really important to see all of these things when you're looking at hormones, not just to look at cortisol. And the reason why I don't want to just look at cortisol is because DHEA we produce in response to cortisol. So if, for example, you have normal looking cortisol levels, but you have all of the symptoms of somebody who technically would have tanked cortisol, that's when we look in, are we in a transition phase? Were we in an acute state of stress and our cortisol was really, really high before? And your body goes, I cannot keep outputting this much cortisol. It is dangerous. So it goes, stop, pull it down. But you're still dealing with the same amount of stress that would require all of that cortisol. And so now you're fatigued and you're tired, even though cortisol levels are quote unquote normal. Remember, our body's always trying to keep us alive. I can get a better idea of where that transition is going on by also looking at DHEA in comparison to your cortisol. So that's where, again, this all starts to pull together. Another thing that you can see on the Dutch is metabolized cortisol, which is the ability of the adrenals to output cortisol. So I find that to be very useful as well. We literally, I think you can find out so many things from the Dutch test that if you're looking at it from the right lens, I recently was looking at somebody's Dutch test who they had it ran and they were looking at it going, it looks pretty normal, right? So why am I dealing with all of this fatigue? Why am I dealing with all of this acne? And I put on my little hormone lens glasses and I looked at it for them and I was telling them, you have to look at it all together. So even though it's not horrible looking in the terms of a Dutch lab, your estrogen is trending on the much higher side. And you can see that your liver was not keeping up with the amount of estrogen that was outputted. And then that cortisol and DHEA pattern was so insightful for her because we saw that she had been in acute stress and she wasn't anymore. Her body was still stressed, but her body wasn't producing that same amount of cortisol anymore, which if you're still dealing with the same amount of stress, but you aren't outputting the same amount of cortisol, you are tired. You're very, very tired. And so it always cracks me up when I see on TikTok and all these social media patterns where people are like, cortisol, I need the cortisol fixing drink, which if any of you have ever wondered, what's in the cortisol, what is that hook they always say, fix your cortisol drink? I don't know. It's definitely viral. It's antioxidants. It's very good marketing. It's just antioxidants because antioxidants are going to help with the oxidation that's happening due to stress. Antioxidants are very cool and it typically has magnesium, which is very calming. Okay. So that's what's in that viral cortisol fixing drink. Not saying that those things are bad. I'm just saying that's what it is. It's just the basics. So that's why I love the Dutch. I think it can give you a lot of deeper insight than just blood. If I need faster results for someone, I will run a blood panel. Okay, another one that goes into the hormone labs is GI map. Now I prefer the GI map test versus just stool testing because of how they test certain things. And I find that you don't get a lot of false negatives that you would get with other stool tests. So the reason why I love this is there's a few things. One, you can look at something called beta-glucuronidase on a GI map. Now, beta-glucuronidase is an enzyme that's produced in your gut. And if it is too high, it actually unbinds toxins. So then we have this recirculation of estrogen. So think about it as we want beta-glucuronidase really, really low. And your body produces the correct things to bind to toxins so that we can poop them out. And beta-glucuronidase is too high, it unbinds the toxin and the estrogen just goes keeps recirculating, and you are therefore not detoxing correctly. Now, this is often seen with somebody who feels like they do all of the detox things and it's not working. We may want to look at what's going on with beta-glucuronidase in the gut. That can be really, really useful. Another thing that I really love about the GI map is looking for H. pylori. And H. pylori is a bacterium that resides in the stomach, and it lowers your stomach acid. Now, why is this an issue? If we don't have enough stomach acid, we're not going to be digesting our food well. So therefore, you're not going to be pulling the nutrients that you need from your food. If we don't have optimal stomach acid, that also starts to make us a perfect host for overgrowth of bacteria. It starts to make us a perfect host for parasites to come live their best life, right? So you have to we want optimal stomach acid. H. pylori is another one that plays a big role in thyroid issues and not absorbing your thyroid hormone or thyroid medication and things like that. So the GI map can really play a really big role in how you are utilizing everything. The GI map is not something I always start off with. I know for a lot of people it's a foundational lab that they start with, but again, I want to start with some other foundations first. I want to start with optimizing your poop schedule. I want to start with optimizing your sleep. I want to start with optimizing your blood sugar balance. I want to start with optimizing your minerals, and then I will run a GI map. And also sometimes I will run an HTMA and I see so many red flags on it and go, okay, you need to run a GI map because we need to know what is going on in your gut right now. Because you can also see what types of overgrowth of bacteria are there, whether or not you don't have good bacteria, enough good bacteria. So I find that to be really useful. So those would kind of go into and then a bonus one that I do like to see in the functional world is an OAT test, which is an organic acids test. I can see a lot of markers for fungal overgrowth in the body, which can then impact how you are digesting oxalates. This all has to do with mold. So I will recommend running this if I see signs for it on an HMA or we see signs for it in their lifestyle. It also can give us really good ideas on methylation status or how you are methylating. It can also tell us how you are detoxing if your toxic exposure is really high, which I think are all really good things to know if you're diving deeper. Is it the first one I would start with? Not necessarily, but it is one that I often use because I think it can give a lot of insight, especially if I think the client may be having issues with mold or methylation, just methylation in the terms of they don't have enough of the nutrients they need to do methylation. Or if we're having somebody that has a lot of issues with PMDD and neurotransmitters and dopamine and all of that, then I would also run an OAT test. So those are my bonus things of what I would look for, what to ask for and look for. Okay. So basically, if you're working with someone and they're only doing basic blood work, I do think that you can see a lot with basic blood work, but I think that you need to dive a little bit deeper, right? I think that you can have more answers, okay? So if you feel like your labs have come back normal and you still have a lot of symptoms, let's explore some other labs. Let's figure out what you need, not just blood work. And that is something that we do in the Hormone Reset program. And everything's customized. So I just want to talk about this really quickly because I want you to see results. I want you to feel better, right? And that may mean running certain labs, but I don't throw the book at you right when you come through the door and be like, you have to run this, and this. And you're walking out of the door running $2,000 just in labs, not counting the analysis or supplements or your lifestyle changes or anything like that. And I would rather not do that. So I start with an HTMA. That's my basis because I feel like out of all of the labs. It's the most cost effective, but also it can give so much bang for your buck. So much bang for your buck. You can see so many things with minerals. And then I let the HTMA guide me. And I go, okay, based on these markers, if we don't see improvement in XYZ in about 8 weeks, then we're going to run this test. Or sometimes I see some markers that are so wild. I'm like, you need to run a GMF right now, or you need to run an oat test right now. And that is my recommendation to you. But I don't start off the bat with all of these labs because I don't necessarily think you need all of those labs right away. I think they're tools to help you dig deeper as needed to see what's going on with your hormones. But you have to remember, when hormones are off, you have to go upstream to see what's causing your hormones to be off. And that's why I start with minerals. I think that is like the foundational functional lab. You can see so much, but also from a functional lens. I think that is so important because HTMA is taking off. It's getting its own life, which is so cool, but also not cool in the fact that there's so many people out there that are just giving you a generic like blankety blank. And I will have practitioners in my DMs and they're like, I am looking at this HTMA and or even their own HTMA and go, it makes no sense to me. Like this would mean that I'm not going to throw them under the bus. But anyways, look at your HTMA through a hormone lens if you're dealing with hormonal issues. You have to put all the puzzle pieces together. You can't just look at one marker. Okay, that's where I think people get lost is they go, I have high tissue calcium, I have high magnesium, I have really high cobalt, I have really high ferritin, and they try and individually manipulate these markers versus looking at the lab as a whole and the lifestyle and the history and going, what does this tell me? What can I do to actually look at this lab in terms of supporting from the ground up versus just manipulating individual things, okay? And that gives you a story. And when you have a story, that makes sense to the client, right? And if it makes sense to you, you're going to implement and therefore you're going to see results. And that's why I think we do have such a high success rate with our clients is because we have such a high success rate of implementation because we can tie it together so well for you. And it makes so much sense with your symptoms that you're just literally like, yes, 100%, I need to do this right now. Okay. So if you have run the labs and you feel like they don't match your symptoms, you're not crazy. You're just not looking at them through the right lens. Okay. And I really want you to think about it from how can you, instead of go, the labs aren't telling me the right answer. Instead go, maybe I'm not running the right labs, or maybe I'm not looking at them through the right lens. Okay. And that can give you a little bit more insight because I've had clients that have had HTMAs done before. And then they come, I had one, for example, that she had Hashimoto's and she actually had a history of cancer a long time ago. It wasn't like 2 or 3 years ago. And she had an HTMA done before and she'd been on a protocol and she had felt better. And then she'd come to us and she had an HTMA done and she goes, oh my gosh, nobody ever made this connection to me before because she had something called really high tissue calcium, which is a numbing mineral. And when we were able to tie that together with her history and the rest of her lifestyle, she felt so seen and heard in her symptoms. And she goes, oh my gosh, this is why I have XYZ symptoms. And we were able to put together a lifestyle support for her versus just a supplement to actually have that complete transformation for her. So yeah, I love labs. They're cool. They're a big puzzle piece. And I think that with the right support, you can love labs too. So if you are wanting to dive into that and you want support looking through a hormone lens and you actually are ready to have somebody walk through that with you step by step instead of just throwing a book at you and running all the labs and all the money when you just maybe need to look at things through a different lens, I encourage you to check out the Hormone Reset program. You can go to bit.ly/HRP free call and you can talk to Alexis. And Alexis is one of my past clients and she's awesome. And guess what, guys? She's just about to finish becoming an FDN herself. And so you can go talk to her and hear what she has to say about how we can help you.